Welcome to Centerpiece. This is Evan Yvonne, your host. Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. This is a good morning. I had a very relaxing time in worship and praise this morning. And I think that God is just He opens up such new ideas of who He is, how He is, and as you're walking with Him, He unveils Himself. The other day, I was reading, and it's sticking still in my mind that when Jesus washed the disciples' feet, He disrobed Himself. He was completely naked. And I said, that means something. Obviously, it's not an erotic thing. But I believe that He's adding on to that. His transparency and His willingness to bring you into His rest as you're walking with Him is so profound. It is so good. It is so what's needed when we think about being in relationship with the Lord. I don't necessarily have an issue with religion. I have an issue with men's traditions. But, to me, religion is associated with the holiness of God, how He needs to be served, how we should desire to serve Him the way He wants to be served, how we should desire to worship Him in the ways that He has said to worship Him. It's not all over the place. So to me, religion has a function. I understand when people say, oh, I'm not religious. Yeah, I think that people are more so in ignorance talking about the traditions of men that are added into the worship of God. And I find that distinction. Like, I feel like I can hear it when people are saying why they're saying, oh, I'm not religious. I consider myself to be more spiritual. But, religion was created for us, the precepts and the constraints of how we are to worship God. Even when Jesus comes to the woman at the well and says, you're going to worship in spirit and truth. A day is going to come where no one will worship either in the temple nor the mountain, but you'll worship God in spirit and in truth. That's still a form, to me, of religion, because it is something set forth that God is saying, and obviously Jesus did not say anything that the Father wasn't saying. So anyway, I don't want to get all up into that, but how He walks with us, what happens in the midst of the relationship that we have, and how we are going to serve God, how we're going to worship Him, how we're going to follow Him. That all of this is kind of being unfolded for me. So yesterday, I was able to go to an event. I had to walk through a neighborhood that in this area has been known for, drug use and just crime. And it's considered one of the worst parts of the city. I had to walk through it to get to where I was going to. I was wanting to go and serve, helping paint this mural at where they were setting up at a hospital, a children's hospital in the city. Now, the mural painting was connected to a cause that was to bring awareness and bring some sort of hope, surrounded by people who were considering suicide or who have survived suicide or those that are thinking about it. So obviously to me, art is such a powerful tool God used in my life, and I know that He can use it in other people's lives. So I said, this will be a great opportunity. I did think that there would be more kids there, but it wasn't. It was a lot of adults, which was amazing. But my point is that I had to walk through this neighborhood, that's been ravaged by drugs. And as I'm walking through the neighborhood, there's a couple of things. I know the Lord is always with me. So he reigns in the midst of his enemies. For me to walk in an area, not having 1 ounce of fear, not being worried or concerned about the people who I have to walk past and all of that, that sort of freedom is just, that for me is resurrection life. It is resurrection life, because if we that are carrying the testimony of Jesus and the resurrection of God and the truth and the understanding, if we're not willing to go into places where light can be shine, where light can be passing through, we are instruments of light, thanks to the Lord Jesus Christ. And there were people out there, there were ministries out there serving, providing, because it was pretty cold yesterday. There were ministries on the street that had set up tents for clothing for people who lived in the area, and food for people who lived in the area or just needed it. There were ministries that were walking down the street. So the people of God were out yesterday, and I applaud them, because to have a heart to serve, and to have a heart to serve in the hardest areas is such a needed, God walks with us. And in those ways, when people are just kind of in these oppressed places or in these distressed areas, where people will come along and just say, okay, I'll walk with you. I walked past a gentleman that was talking to another guy, and that just was a beautiful picture of ministry. They were just leaning on a building, having a conversation, smoking a cigarette, talking. Those kinds of small acts of service are significant to God and my belief. But one of the things that God is reinforcing for me this morning, because one of the parts of my worship that was significant this morning was, I kept saying to the Lord, you are the God of resurrection. And he truly is the God of resurrection. And when we become resurrected, if you become resurrected from being addicted to drugs, every time you show back up in those areas and you're walking through, not oppressed, not having defeated Satan through the resurrection power of Jesus, of bringing your life back to life, where you're not a slave to that sin anymore, you're a walking testimony, and the powers of darkness hate it. They hate your presence. They hate that you're coming through, having defeated that which they were designed and designated to serve up. Their failure, they have to watch you and realize that, oh, that is a failure that we have. What a great feeling. What an amazing victory. So this morning, the Lord, as I was worshiping, waiting on the Lord I was laying down, reclining in a way, resting in the Lord, but I was still worshiping. I was still praying. My heart was still very prayerful, and I'm waiting for him to suggest a word, because I wanted to read the word and I wanted to read the scriptures, but I didn't have anything that I felt was in my heart strong. And then he gives me this picture as I'm laying down and reclining. He's like, why don't you read about Lazarus reclining at the table with me after he was resurrected from the dead? How perfect. How perfect. Yes, of course that is what I need to be reading right now. Of course I want you to demonstrate and bring it to life so that it is something that is a weapon for me moving forward. And I get into the word, and it says that afterward, Jesus went back to Bethany. Bethany has an interesting meaning for a word, is an interesting name for a city where Lazarus was resurrected. Lazarus was of Bethany. Bethany means house of affliction. This is where Lazarus was resurrected from, the house of affliction. He is worthy of praise. House of affliction. Never knew that. So I'm, being nosy, I'm looking up these words. Lazarus is resurrected from the house of affliction. He is found after being resurrected. Jesus is invited to a dinner in his honor, because what else is there to do but celebrate this occasion? Lazarus is among those reclining at the table with Jesus. Martha is serving. And I said, wow, this is all happening in the city called House of Affliction, where affliction is a picture. When we think about affliction, in the Hebrew, it translates to oppress and humbled. In the Greek and English, it goes a little bit farther. Place of sorrow, pain, depression, suppression. So it has more of a negative connotation to it. And I kind of want to lean more towards what the Hebrew of it is, because I believe that you can extract a lot more of the revelation of Jesus and the resurrection. Places of oppression. And I don't always, I'm often very angry at oppression, but I'm seeing it differently, because Lazarus, Martha, and Mary never moved out of the city. They remained as a testimony. They remained as a testimony in the same space, in the same city, that is pretty much saying this is the ghetto. This is like the projects. This is like the projects. They remained in that place as a testimony to not being anymore a slave to that place, a slave to that sin, a slave to its circumstances, a slave to its biases, a slave to it. So in other words, they no longer, Jesus had given them the power to have their heads up high in a place that was designed to oppress them. They didn't have to carry the weight of that anymore, because God was with them. How else could you explain the resurrection? And this is so good, because remember, the Pharisee hated this. The Pharisee, they wanted to kill Lazarus. And I believe they wanted to kill Lazarus because, just like the Pharisee of today that will beat you down, you're living in those places because you're living in sin. You're steeped in sin. You're steeped in curse. All of that. Okay, maybe so. Maybe so. But when the God of resurrection comes, guess what he does? He reigns in the midst of his enemies. He does not need me to move from this place. He will show his glory from out of it. And how angering that would be to those who say no. When God is with you, you make it up here with us. You make it to the affluent place. You make it to what we call visually the blessed place. No, I could be blessed right here. I could be resurrected right in this, which you won't touch, which you won't come into. They wanted to kill Lazarus because that meant that everybody in that space could be resurrected. God could possibly be with them in their affliction. in their spaces of oppression, in the city that was meant to marginalize them. What a God we serve. His strategy, his strategy for bringing egg on the enemy's face is hilarious to me. It is so funny. Who moves like that? Who says, you know what? All right, the tradition of man says this. I never said it. They're saying that I do say it, which is they're holding, what would be the teachings that are supposed to come to my people. Yet they're withholding them from them because they're looking at it incorrectly. They don't understand the scriptures. Jesus comes demonstrating this mighty power of resurrection in a place that resurrection is not supposed to happen according to men's tradition and understanding of the scriptures. He defies all of the odds, goes back. Now they're reclining at a table, which lets me know that resurrection brings you at peace. What is it to have just the harmony in your house? Everything is the perfection, even in the midst of what is supposed to be just busyness, the racing of the mind, the poverty of the heart, the poverty that's surrounding you is supposed to be directing your every path. This is the plan of Satan. Let this poverty direct your lives because it's going to direct it into every area that I can reign, which is sin and disobedience and confusion and just nonsense, violence and fighting and arguing because of all of the situations and all the pressures that everybody is under. It is a melting pot of drama for the kingdom of darkness, and they love it. Yeah, let this be an afflicted area where everybody feels like they need to be against one another. They're fighting flesh against flesh. This is perfect. And Jesus comes and disrupts all of that. Where it's like, no, I'm going to bring in peace. You're going to be reclining at a table. Nobody is going to be on edge. Nobody's jumping up scared because somebody's knocking on the door thinking that, there's peace. There's harmony. There is life. There's the rest. There's the paradise. He is all of that. He is the resurrection. The resurrection brings you into peace that surpasses all understanding. The resurrection brings you into pleasantness of being around those that are also celebrating, are also overwhelmed with the reality of what has happened to you. If you make it where you are not on drugs anymore and everybody isn't celebrating, it's an issue, because look at what was happening with Judas. Everybody else is reclining. Martha is serving. Mary is getting oil, perfume that is very expensive, pouring it on Jesus. There's a harmony. He breaks it up with, hey, what are you doing? We could have sold that. The cares and the worries of life. He is the one that displayed where the poverty rushed into. The poverty that was supposed to be oppressing everybody else that's at the party and the dinner has entered into Judas. And now he is operating out of the poverty, operating out of the cares of the world, disrupting the peace, disrupting because he's a betrayer of resurrection. He's a betrayer of life. He's the one that comes in where it's like, what is everybody celebrating for? No, get back to being oppressed. Get back to being in poverty. Get back to being beneath everyone else. Get back to not being happy. Get back to being depressed. Get back to being suicidal. Get back to it. Get back to fighting. Get back to not knowing where your next meal is going to come from. Get back to it. Get back to faithlessness. He is that represented in the room. He is the heart of the Pharisee who's plotting to kill Lazarus now. He is that. He's the informant. He's the narc that is communicating that energy back to them. No, we need them to get back to being beneath, not ahead, not above. Get back to it. Get back to being mad. Get back to being angry. Get back to being disappointed. Get back to it. Get back to knowing that God is not with you. Stay there. This is the heart of those that are supposed to be setting people free. Lazarus just came from a campaign where Jesus had given them authority to cast out demons, to set the oppressed free, to heal people. He was entrusted with that a couple chapters before. Now he's here mad that people, no, don't be set free. Get back to being bound up. What a mess. But Jesus is the resurrection and the life. And in the midst of all of this, Jesus speaks up. You're always going to have the poor and oppressed among you. You're not always going to have me. Talking directly to Judas. Because we always have him if we want him. And being poor, being oppressed, being in places, that was my point too, as far as the Hebrew translation of affliction, the house of affliction. Because oppression, I'm seeing more and more, and I understand this more and more from personal experience. Oppression, lack, those things. Even though we want to thrive, we want to strive to elevate, to get more into being able to handle the riches of God. When we're in the place of oppression, do not despise it. It is there to humble you. And what is the blessing of being humbled? God draws near to the humble. He reigns in the midst of his enemies. So, irregardless of our socioeconomic positions, we don't have to be the victims. We don't have to be in prison for it. Some promises some promises are for our generations to see, that are coming through us, that are being initiated with us. And those places are okay. But I love what the Lord has shown me. Live as a victory in the midst of your enemies. If you're in these humble positions, if you're in the places of poverty, in the areas of cities that carry the weight of violence and affliction and oppression, this is not new to God. We're always going to have that. He says that. I don't believe that it because he wants it. I believe it's just because the enemy, we're driving the kingdom of darkness out. We're waiting for the Lord to come back with his glorious city. So in the meantime of that, there's the world, it's fallen. But we don't have to live fallen, even in a place that's fallen. Because poverty can show up in the heart of those that are holding the money bags. That's where the poverty will show back up at. You don't have to maintenance the poverty. The heart that is corrupt, the heart that is antichrist will maintenance the poverty. It doesn't matter how much money they have. They could be a quadrillionaire. But if they're antichrist, they're hosting the poverty that was intended for those living in the house of affliction. You can be free. You can be the most wealthy person with no money because you have the deposit of Jesus. You have the testimony of of Jesus Christ, which will eventually bring you into your wealth, which will eventually bring you into your inheritance. Don't stop. Don't stop. Because you will receive your inheritance. You will receive it in this life. Jesus said that he would add on more of what you had to leave behind and what you lost. He will multiply it in this lifetime. And we have to believe for that. So we don't stay stuck in the spaces, in the houses of affliction. But we don't have to succumb to it. We don't have to be slaves of it. We can indeed reign. We can indeed have dominion. And we can indeed walk as victorious people who are resurrected right in the face of the enemy. And do it with a smile on our faces, with a head held high, saying, Satan, you did not win. Ha, 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 ha. I am walking, and I'm walking in your territory unchained, unbound by your deceits and your schemes, your plans of wickedness towards my life. So live resurrected. Live resurrected. And be blessed. Thank you so much.